Let me tell you a story about how an HOA tried to control me, and how their arrogance backfired in the most spectacular way possible. It started with something simple. I just wanted peace. My cabin in the woods wasn't a luxury mansion. It wasn't some massive property. It was my little getaway. A place I had inherited from my grandfather. The cabin sat deep inside a forested community that had, over the years, been overtaken by a homeowners association. When my grandfather first built the cabin, there wasn't any HOA, just woods, neighbors who minded their own business, and one narrow road that crossed a wooden bridge over the creek. Now, here's the kicker. That bridge. The only access point into the entire neighborhood. My grandfather built it. With his own money on his own land. And he deeded it to me before he passed. Meaning, legally, I owned the one and only way in, or out of the community. But the HOA didn't know that yet. When I first returned to the cabin after a few years away, I noticed something different. Signs everywhere. HOA members only. Trespassers will be towed. Property subject to HOA rules. I frowned. HOA rules. I wasn't a member of their little club. My cabin wasn't even within the lots they officially controlled. My deed was separate, independent. My grandfather had been clever like that, so I ignored the signs and went about my business. I drove across the bridge, parked by the cabin, and started cleaning up the place. Dusty furniture, cobwebs. A few repairs, nothing too bad. That's when she showed up. Her name was Karen. And no, I'm not being funny. Her actual name was Karen. She was the president of the HOA. And she carried herself like a queen ruling over peasants. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses on her face, lips pursed like she had bitten into a lemon. "Excuse me?" she snapped as she marched up my porch. "You can't just be here." I raised an eyebrow. "This is my property." "Not anymore," she said smugly. "This entire neighborhood is under HOA governance. If you want to use the road, if you want access, if you want utilities, you'll need to register and pay dues." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Lady, I don't think you understand. My property isn't under your HOA. Never has been." Her eyes narrowed. "Everyone here is under the HOA. Those are the rules." "Show me where in my deed it says that," I countered. That stopped her for a moment. She hadn't expected pushback. But she recovered quickly. "Doesn't matter. If you're crossing the road, you're using our infrastructure. You can't just come and go without approval." That's when I smiled. Because this was about to get very, very interesting. "You mean the bridge?" I asked. "Yes," she said confidently. "That bridge belongs to the HOA, and without access rights, you can't use it." "Oh, really?" I leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. "That's funny. Because I own the bridge." She froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like a fish out of water. "What?" "You heard me," I said. "Check the county records. That bridge sits on my land, deeded directly to me. My grandfather built it, paid for it, maintained it, and he passed it down to me. Meaning if anyone here is using that bridge, they're doing so with my permission." The color drained from her face. For a second, I thought she might actually faint. But then she did what people like her always do. She doubled down. "That's impossible," she snapped. "No one person can own a community access point. We'll fight this." "Go ahead," I shrugged. "But until then, I suggest you think twice before telling me what I can and can't do on my own property." She stormed off, fuming, muttering under her breath. I knew this was far from over. In fact, it was only the beginning, because what I didn't realize yet was just how far this HOA would go to try and control me, and just how sweet my revenge would be when I finally had enough. Asterisk, Asterisk, the morning after Karen's little outburst. I thought maybe that was the end of it. You know, she'd stew for a while, complain to her board, then realize she didn't have a leg to stand on. But no, that's not how HOAs operate. I woke up to the sound of hammering at first. I thought maybe one of the neighbors was doing some repairs. But when I stepped outside, I nearly laughed out loud. Karen and two other board members' clipboard warriors in matching polo shirts were installing a giant metal gate. At the entrance to the bridge, I strolled down the path, hands in my pockets, and watched them struggling to lift a heavy iron bar into place. You folks need some help, I called out, grinning. Karen whirled around. You can't be here right now. This is HOA business. HOA business. On my bridge? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Her face turned red. This is community property. No, I said calmly. It's private property. Mine? I told you yesterday. One of the men muttered under his breath. He's bluffing. HOA owns everything past the creek. I smirked. Want to bet? Because I've got a deed in the cabin that proves otherwise. Karen ignored me. We're installing this gate to control traffic. Too many unauthorized vehicles have been using the road. From now on, only registered HOA members get key fobs. You'll need to pay dues to get one. I chuckled. You don't get it, do you? I don't need a key fob. Because I own the bridge. Meaning I leaned in close. You're the ones trespassing right now. That hit her like a slap. She stammered, we'll see about that. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. I spread my arms, looking forward to it. Then, without another word, I walked past them, stepped onto my bridge, and just to make a point yanked their half-installed gate post right out of the ground and carried it onto my side. Karen gasped like I had just committed a felony. You can't do that. Actually, I can, I called back. Property rights, remember? And with that, I left them fuming on the far side of the creek by lunchtime. I had already received an official-looking letter taped to my cabin door. Notice of violation, it read in bold letters. According to the HOA, I had violated 3 rules. Unauthorized use of community infrastructure, failure to register property with the HOA, destruction of HOA property. I burst out laughing. HOA property. They were really trying this angle. I stuffed the letter into my pocket, grabbed my phone, and dialed my buddy Mark, an attorney who owed me a favor. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Yo, what's up? Mark, I said, still chuckling. You are not going to believe this. My HOA just tried to gate off my bridge. Wait, your bridge? Yep, the one I legally own. They're saying it's theirs. He laughed. Classic. Want me to draft a cease and desist? Not yet, I said. Let's see how far they're willing to push this first. But keep your schedule open. I might need you soon. That evening, I drove into town for supplies. When I came back, guess what? They had parked an HOA security golf cart right in the middle of my bridge. Blocking me from crossing, I stopped my truck just short of it and rolled down my window. The security guard, if you could call him, that looked about 19. Skinny, nervous, wearing a neon vest 2 sizes too big. Sorry, sir, he stammered. Bridge is closed. HOA orders. I grinned. Son, do you know whose bridge this is? He blinked. HOAS. Nope, mine. I leaned out the window. You're trespassing. You've got 5 seconds to move that cart, or I'm towing it. The kid looked like he might cry. He grabbed his radio and called Karen. Within minutes, she came storming down the path in her SUV, tires crunching on the gravel. What do you think you're doing? She shouted, jumping out of her car. I was about to ask you the same thing, I said. You're blocking my bridge. This is our community road. She snapped. You can't just drive across whenever you feel like it. Lady, I said, my patience running thin. I don't need your permission. I don't pay your dues. And unless you want me to start charging you a toll, I suggest you get this golf cart out of my way. That last part hit her like a thunderbolt. A toll. I shrugged. Sure, you want to use my bridge? Fine, but access isn't free. Maybe $500 a car per month. Seems fair. Her jaw dropped. That's extortion. No, I said smoothly. That's property ownership. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She sputtered for a few seconds, then ordered the kid to move the cart. As I rolled my truck across the bridge, I gave her a friendly wave. Have a good evening, Karen. The next few days were interesting. First, I got more violation letters. Then, they tried sending me an invoice for community dues. When I ignored it, they added late fees. Finally, they called a special HOA meeting specifically about me. I wasn't invited, of course. But my neighbor Jim, who secretly hated the HOA, filled me in afterward. Dude, he said, laughing so hard he nearly spilled his beer. You're public enemy number one. Karen called you a squatter. A squatter? On my own land. Yep, Jim chuckled. She's got half the board convinced you're bluffing about owning the bridge. They think if they push hard enough, you'll cave and sign into the HOA. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Good. Let them think that. The longer this goes on, the better it'll be when the truth comes out. Jim raised his bottle. To chaos. To chaos, I agreed, clinking mine against his. But here's the thing. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait. If they wanted to play games, I was ready to up the stakes. Because if Karen thought she could bully me into submission, she had no idea what I was capable of. The morning after Karen got served, I expected retaliation. Maybe she'd storm back up to my cabin with more fake violations. Maybe she'd send her security team to park another golf cart on the bridge. But instead, silence. The HOA went quiet. No letters, no calls, no new signs. It was almost eerie, and that's when I realized they weren't giving up. They were regrouping, so I decided to make the first move. I spent the next couple days making improvements to the bridge, replacing old boards, tightening bolts, reinforcing the railings. Not because it needed it, but because it made a statement. When neighbors saw me out there working, some stopped to chat. You really own this thing? One man asked skeptically. Yep, I said, hammering a nail. Deeded and everything. He scratched his head. Well, it's held up better than anything the HOA's touched. Guess you're doing something right. That was exactly the reaction I wanted. By the time I was done, I installed a brand new gate at the bridge entrance. A sturdy one. With a lock only I had the key to, and on it I hung another sign, access permitted to residents. HOA board members must request entry in writing. I swear, I could hear Karen's scream echo across the neighborhood when she saw it. Sure enough, the next day, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. This is outrageous. It was Karen, of course. You can't restrict access to us. Not to residents, I said calmly. They can cross freely, but you've been trespassing, harassing, and damaging my property. From now on, you need permission. That's illegal. She shrieked. No, I said, smiling. It's boundaries. Something you clearly don't understand. She hung up on me. The funny thing is, I didn't actually lock out the HOA board. Not yet. I just wanted the idea of it to fester. And oh boy, did it. Within 48 hours, rumors spread like wildfire. Half the neighborhood thought I was charging tolls. The other half thought the HOA was lying about owning the bridge. Neighbors started approaching me quietly, whispering, if you ever do start charging, I'll pay you before I pay them. That's when I knew I had them exactly where I wanted them. But Karen wasn't done. A week later, I came back from town to find a sheriff's cruiser parked near the bridge. 2 deputies were standing with Karen, who was waving papers in their faces. As I pulled up, she pointed at me dramatically. "That's him. Arrest him for blocking community property." The deputies walked over, hands resting casually on their belts. "Sir, this lady's filed a complaint. She says you're unlawfully restricting access." I handed them a folder. Inside was my deed, the county plat map, and Mark's cease and desist letter. The older deputy flipped through it, nodding. Then he turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, "this clearly shows the bridge is his property. Unless you've got evidence otherwise, this is a civil matter, not criminal." Karen's face went beet red. But the HOA rules don't override property deeds," the deputy said firmly. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud. The deputies left. Karen stood there, trembling with rage, clutching her useless papers. Finally, she spat, "You'll regret this." I smiled, looking forward to it. After that, I decided to take things up another notch. If the HOA wanted to treat me like an outsider, fine. I'd become exactly the tan outsider with leverage, so I sent out letters to every resident in the neighborhood. Polite, professional, and to the point. As the legal owner of the community bridge, I hereby confirm all residents are free to use it without restriction. However, the HOA board has repeatedly interfered with this access. If further interference continues, I reserve the right to implement access controls, including tolls or permits. This will never apply to ordinary residents only, to those who abuse their privilege. I signed it, notarized it, and mailed copies to every single household. The fallout was immediate. Neighbors started showing up at HOA meetings demanding answers. Why were they picking a fight with the guy who owned the bridge? Why were dues going up if he was the one maintaining the only road in? Karen tried to spin it, of course. She ranted about outsiders and property values, but the more she talked, the more people realized. She was full of it. Then came the breaking point. One evening, during a heavy rainstorm, a tree fell across the far end of the bridge. Nothing major, but it blocked traffic. By the time I got down there with my chainsaw, half a dozen cars were backed up. People were frustrated, honking, headlights flashing through the rain. I waved them back, fired up the saw, and started cutting. Within 30 minutes, the tree was gone, the bridge was clear, and traffic flowed again. And you know who wasn't there? The HOA. Not a single board member lifted a finger. Neighbors noticed. One woman rolled down her window and shouted, "Thank you. At least somebody takes care of this place." I gave a little bow and smiled. Just doing my job as owner. Word spread fast. By the next day, half the neighborhood was on my side. And that's when I realized I didn't just have leverage. I had power, real power, and I was about to use it. Asterisk by now. The HOA had thrown everything at me. Fake fines, threats, lawyers, even the sheriff. And every time, they lost. But I knew Karen. She wasn't going to give up. Not until she got total control. So, I decided to change the game. If she wanted war, fine. I'd give her one. The idea came to me one Saturday morning while I was sipping coffee on the porch, watching a line of cars cross the bridge. Neighbors waved as they passed, real smiles, genuine appreciation. And then Karen's SUV rolled across. No wave, just a glare through the tinted glass. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just the owner of a bridge. I was the gatekeeper of the entire neighborhood, so why not act like one? That afternoon, I built a new sign and posted it right next to the gate. Notice effective immediately. HOA board members must pay a toll of $250 a month for bridge access. All other residents remain free. I added a number at the bottom. Payments accepted via check or PayPal. It was beautiful. Clean, professional, completely legal, and it spread like wildfire. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was buzzing nonstop with texts from neighbors. "Lo, did you really put a toll on just the HOA board? Best thing I've ever seen. I'll bake you a pie. Karen is losing her mind." She just stormed around the block, screaming about extortion. By noon, there was a full-blown HOA crisis meeting at the clubhouse. I didn't even need to attend Jim, my beer-drinking neighbor. Liv texted me the whole thing. "Dude, she's red as a tomato. She just called you a terrorist. Half the people are clapping, half are booing." I sat back, feet up, laughing until my sides hurt. But here's the thing. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. Every time the HOA fought me, they exposed themselves. Every lie they told, every threat they made, it chipped away at their credibility. And now, with the toll, I'd force them into a corner. If they paid, they admitted I owned the bridge. If they refused, they risked being cut off. Either way, I won, of course. Karen tried to call my bluff. She marched down to the bridge with 2 board members in tow, waving a stack of papers. "You can't enforce this," she shouted. "This is extortion." "Extortion?" I said calmly. "Funny, you've been charging people dues for years, haven't you? Fining them for grass length, mailbox color, fence height. That's different," she snapped. "How?" I asked. "At least I'm honest about it. And the difference is, residents don't have to pay me. Only you." One of the board members muttered, "Karen, maybe we should just pay it." Her head snapped toward him like a hawk spotting prey. "No, don't you dare." I grinned. "Suit yourself. But if you don't pay by the 1st of the month, no access." She sputtered, screamed something about lawsuits, and stormed off again. The days that followed were glorious. For once, I wasn't the one under pressure. They were. Residents started turning on the board. "Why are we fighting the guy who fixes the bridge? Why are our dues going up while he's charging you, not us?" One man even stood up in a meeting and said, "If we had any sense, we'd dissolve the HOA and just let him run things." Karen nearly fainted. Then, something happened that I hadn't expected. I got a letter in the mail, but not from the HOA. It was from a group of residents, over 30 signatures at the bottom. The letter said, "We, the undersigned, support your right to own and manage the bridge. We do not support the HOA board's actions and are prepared to vote for their removal if necessary. Please let us know how we can help." I read it 3 times. For the first time, I wasn't just fighting the HOA. I had allies. Real ones, and with them behind me. I realized something. This wasn't just about the bridge anymore. It was about taking down the entire HOA. I called Mark, my attorney, that night. "Think I can push this further?" I asked. He chuckled. "You've got them on the ropes. One good shove, and the board collapses." I leaned back in my chair, smiling. Then it's time to shove. And so I started planning. Not just to win the fight, but to end the HOA. Once and for all. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. The board was falling apart. At first, it was whispers. A board member quitting here, another one skipping meetings there. Then came the resignations. Quiet at first, then louder. Within 3 weeks of my toll sign going up, 2 of the 5 board members had stepped down. Why? Because their neighbors were furious. See, most residents didn't mind me. They'd driven across my bridge for years without issue. They saw me maintaining it, fixing it, clearing it when storms hit. But the board? They were just clipboard tyrants who fined people for leaving their trash cans out too long. Now the whole community was watching them pick a fight with the one guy keeping their Only road alive, and they didn't like what they saw, but Karen wasn't backing down. If anything, she doubled her efforts. Flyers started showing up in mailboxes. Sloppy little pamphlets with bold headlines. "Don't let him take our community. The bridge bandit is trying to control us. Only the HOA can keep property values safe." I laughed so hard when I read them. I nearly spit out my beer, because the more she fought me, the more desperate she looked, and the more desperate she looked, the more support I gained. But here's where it got interesting. Late one night, I got a knock at my door. It was Alan, one of the remaining board members, sweaty, nervous, looking over his shoulder like he was doing something illegal just by standing there. "Can we talk?" he whispered. I invited him in, poured him a glass of water. He sat there, wringing his hands. "Look, I don't agree with Karen. I never did. But she's persuasive, intimidating, and if you cross her, she'll bury you." I smirked. "She's been trying. Doesn't seem to be working." He nodded. "That's why I'm here. I think she's about to do something drastic. Something that could hurt everyone." I leaned forward. "Like what?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from his jacket. He slid it across the table. It was a draft petition. A motion to secure a bank loan in the HOA's name. $200,000 purpose. Legal fund to reclaim community infrastructure. I stared at it. "She's trying to mortgage the whole neighborhood. To fight me?" Alan nodded miserably. "If she pushes this through, everyone's dues will skyrocket. And if the HOA defaults, every property owner pays." I whistled low. "She's insane." Alan looked at me desperately. "You have to stop her, please." The next morning, I knew exactly what to do. I didn't confront Karen. I didn't argue. I didn't even show up at the meeting where she planned to present her little petition. Instead, I slipped copies of that document into every single mailbox in the neighborhood. By the time the meeting started, the entire community already knew what she was planning. I wasn't there. But Jim filled me in later, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Dude," he said, tears in his eyes, "you should have seen it." She walked in with her little binder, all smug, ready to pitch this loan. And the second she started talking, people exploded. Exploded? I asked. "Oh yeah." Shouting, booing, waving that paper around. Someone even called her a thief. She couldn't even finish. Had to leave early. Security walked her out. I sat back, grinning. Beautiful. But here's the thing. People like Karen don't go down easy. When cornered, they lash out. And that's exactly what she did. 2 nights later, I heard footsteps on the bridge. Not just one pair, several. I slipped outside, quiet as a shadow, and saw them. 3 bored loyalists, led by Karen herself. They were carrying tools, and then I realized what they were trying to do. They were loosening bolts. Sabotaging my bridge, I stepped into the beam of their flashlights, shotgun in hand. "Evening," I said calmly. They froze. Karen's face went ghost white. "WH, what are you doing?" She stammered. "I should be asking you that," I said, leveling the gun, casually, not aiming, just holding. "Looks like vandalism. Maybe even attempted endangerment. You planning to collapse this bridge while people drive across it?" Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The others dropped their tools and bolted. Karen stayed frozen in place. Shaking, I lowered the gun. "Leave, now. Before I call the sheriff." She scrambled off that bridge so fast, I almost laughed. But I wasn't laughing. Not this time. Because that night, I realized just how far she was willing to go. And if I didn't shut her down for good, she might actually destroy everything. That's when I made up my mind. No more games, no more warnings. It was time to bring the HOA to its knees. Asterisk, asterisk. You ever get that feeling when the tide finally turns and you can smell the victory? That's what it felt like the morning I decided to stop playing chess and start calling checkmate. Up to that point, I'd been tactical small moves, psychological warfare, letting Karen and her cronies trample themselves while the community woke up to the truth. But after the bolt-loosening incident on the bridge, after the tools and the fear and the near-miss, it stopped being a chess game. It was a siege, and I was the last line of defense, so I prepared first thing. Documentation. I spent an entire day at the county recorder's office, pulling every paper, every plat, every tax record. I ordered certified copies, cross-checked signatures, and photocopied every margin note my grandfather had ever scribbled on those old documents. Little lines in the margins that proved intent. I wanted a legal armor so thick no lawyer, no HOA could slip a blade through it. Second, evidence. I installed motion cameras, nothing sneaky, just obvious ones with flashing lights on both ends of the bridge. If anyone tried to come back and sabotage anything, the sheriff would have a highlight reel. Third, community-level moves. I talked to neighbors one-on-one, got them to sign affidavits about the bridge's history, kept a running ledger of everyone who'd ever pitched in to fix a plank or pull a car out of the mud. The more community stories I collected, the more robust my case looked. Less about me, more about the truth. And fourth, strategy. I didn't want to look like an isolated madman slamming a gate shut out of spite. I wanted to be a guardian, someone protecting the only safe route for neighbors while stopping a dangerous, desperate leader from destroying the place they all lived. So, I did what any effective gatekeeper would do. I controlled access legally, visibly, and deliberately. It started subtle. I changed the lock on the gate to a timed programmable deadbolt. Residents could punch in a code at all hours. Board members. They had to submit a written request for a temporary code, which I'd grant only for legitimate, scheduled events. No exceptions. Then I emailed every resident a short direct message. Due to recent attempts to sabotage the bridge and for the safety of all residents, I have implemented controlled access. Residents will have uninterrupted access. Board members must request access in writing for non-residents or for after-hours activities. Any attempts to tamper with the bridge will be reported.professional.com. Unassailable. Because here's the truth. You can seal access to your own property in 100 ways that are perfectly legal. Locking your own gate, if that gate sits on your land, is one of them. I wasn't denying residents access. I was denying the board the ability to treat their role like a license to intimidate. The first board attempt to test me was almost comical. Karen showed up with two of her biggest supporters, her face like thunder, her posture ready for a battle she thought she'd already won. "You can't do this," she barked. "Give us the code." "You sent men to loosen bolts," I said. "You sent people to vandalize this place. I'm not giving the code to people who endanger others." She flung a paper in my face, an injunction. "We filed. You have to allow access while this is pending." I took the paper, read it, and then called Mark right there in front of her. "Mark, you seeing this?" I said loud enough that half the congregation around the clubhouse doorway heard. People love a courtroom drama in real time. He took one look and said, "This is a temporary emergency filing. It's thin, no proof. I'll file a response if they actually serve it." Karen's smile died like a candle in a wind tunnel. Her supporters shuffled their feet. The rest of the neighborhood watched eyes wide. It didn't take long for the sheriff's deputy to swing by again this time. Because a resident had called after witnesses reported Karen and company trying to pry the gate open. The deputy looked at the cameras, at the affidavits I'd gathered, and then at Karen. "Ma'am," he said, polite but firm, "this is a civil dispute. We'll stand by to keep the peace, but tampering with someone's private property, that's a different matter." Karen sputtered. I offered him a cup of coffee. "See, The nice thing about playing by the rules is that people who don't respect them eventually expose themselves. The cameras did most of the talking. Night footage of Karen's lieutenant crouched by a bolt. A time-lapse of them with flashlights. Audio of one of them saying, "Make it look like an accident." That line alone made the neighborhood's blood run cold. I didn't publicize that footage widely yet. I used it where it mattered. I sent a private link to Mark. He loved it. He printed frames and attached them to our legal filings. When the HOA's lawyer demanded I cease and desist my access restrictions, Mark's reply included dispatches, evidence of attempted sabotage, affidavits from residents, and a note that any attempt by the HOA to reassert control through illegal means would trigger immediate damages claims. The legal posture changed. Karen's threats looked weaker. The camera footage looked like a ledger of malice. While the legal team set the trap, I moved on the social front. There's power in rituals. People respect a process that looks fair and open. So I started hosting Bridge Hours, a Saturday morning cleanup day, followed by coffee and donuts where anyone could come down, see the bridge, talk candidly, and air grievances. I invited the HOA to attend. Nearly everyone else did. These weren't just PR stunts. At the first one, a young family told me how their grandmother used to walk across the bridge to visit neighbors. An old man produced an old snapshot of my grandfather repairing a plank after a storm, with a handwritten note on the back, "Keep it safe." An even older woman who'd moved in decades ago said, "We didn't need an HOA to be decent back then. We helped each other." The stories made a web of community memories stronger than any rulebook the HOA could scribble. And just to keep the momentum, I let the toll rumor now, obviously a troll-level legend, do its work. People joked, laughed, and then followed up. "If he's charging Karen, he's our guy." It became a perverse badge of local honor. Our bridge owner had the spine to stand up. It wasn't all sunshine. There were nasty comments, anonymous calls in the middle of the night, and the kind of passive-aggressive vandalism that only small communities excel at. But those things only hardened the resolve of people who saw who was actually doing the work. The real turning point came when a critical mass of residents, enough to legally call for a special meeting, submitted a petition to remove the board for malfeasance and poor governance. The signatures were clean, notarized, and public. Alan, who'd leaked the loan document, emerged as a reluctant hero, confessing in writing that he feared for the community's financial future under Karen's plans. The HOA meetings became a circus. People shouted. Karen tried the old tricks, casting doubt, playing the martyr butt when presented with the loan document, the camera stills, and resonant statements about the bolt loosening. The room's tide turned ugly fast. But here's the thing about sieges. They rarely end without one last desperate gamble. Karen's final play was to bring a developer into the picture. A man with city contacts and a smile that fits his bank account. Overnight, whispers started that Karen was negotiating with him something about consolidating roads, selling right-of-way, and upgrading community infrastructure. The developer's pitch was all sugar property value, modern amenities, pool, gated community deluxe. It sounded harmless until you read the fine print. Development plans would require eminent control of the roads and infrastructure, and those loans Karen wanted. They were the down payment to hand control to outsiders. If the developer got in, the community would change overnight. The old forests would be parceled, the rustic cabins replaced by manicured weekend homes whose owners didn't know the names of their neighbors. The bridge could be subsumed, indemnified. Re-did-I, different kind of erasure. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my privilege, my stubbornness, or my sense of fairness. This was about a neighborhood soul, so I moved everything to a public plane. I organized another community meeting this time. squarely about the developer's plans and Karen's loan pitch. We presented the loan papers. We showed the camera stills of the sabotage. We played an audio clip where Karen said, "Off record. We'll just make this neighborhood more profitable." The room reacted like someone struck a bell. Outrage was immediate. Neighbors who'd been indifferent before suddenly had a line in the sand. The developer's proselytizers slunk out. Even a few of Karen's remaining allies started to look nervous. At the end of the meeting, with more than enough signatures to call for her removal, the HOA board chair Karen was asked to step down pending an investigation. She refused. She started to scream. She cried victim. She accused me of orchestrating a coup. People laughed, incredulous. The votes were counted. The motion to remove her failed by technicality because the bylaws required a 2/3 majority and a handful of hesitant. Residents balked at such a clean break, but the momentum had shifted. The developer pulled back. One by one, Karen's supporters resigned or went quiet. The sheriff, who'd been watching the whole saga with an amused detachment, made a point of telling her that further illegal action could have criminal consequences. And that's where the siege stands now. A neighborhood waking up, a gate standing firm, a board on the ropes, and one stubborn owner who knows the difference between winning and finishing the job. I sat on the bridge that night after everyone left. The moon lay on the creek like cool silver. The cameras blinked red. The lock clicked softly in the breeze. For the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful, but I also felt the weight of what comes next. Because sieges rarely end cleanly, and Karen, she still had cards to play. I closed my eyes, remembering my grandfather's handwriting. Keep it safe. I'd kept more than the bridge. I'd kept a community alive, and now I was going to make sure it stayed that way no matter what price Karen was willing to pay. Asterisk, the siege had weakened them. But the reckoning? That's when you push the walls down. It started with a knock at my door. Not Karen this time. Not her lackeys. But a courier holding an envelope thick with official seals. I signed, opened it, and nearly laughed out loud. Inside was a lawsuit filed by the HOA. Against me, the complaint was 3 inches of nonsense alleging that my bridge was illegally impeding community access, endangering public safety, and depriving residents of their contractual rights. The best part? Attached was a motion for injunctive relief. They wanted the court to force me to unlock my gate, disable my cameras, and grant the HOA unrestricted authority over the bridge. It was the nuclear sale button. Karen had finally pressed it. Now here's the thing about lawsuits. They're expensive, slow, and brutal. But they're also very public. And Karen had just made a colossal mistake. She dragged a private feud into a public courtroom where every dirty little secret could come out under oath. So I smiled, poured myself a drink, and called Mark. He didn't even sound surprised. "I was waiting for this," he said. Then he chuckled. "She has no idea what she's just unleashed." 2 weeks later, the first hearing hit. The courtroom was packed, neighbors, reporters, even a couple of county officials curious about this bridge war. I stood at the defendant's table in my best suit, calm as a stone. Karen sat across from me, face tight, papers stacked high. Her lawyer whispering like a frantic auctioneer. The judgy no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes looked over the case file, sighed, and said, "All right, let's hear it." Karen's lawyer launched into a tirade about rogue landowners, community standards, safety risks, and abuse of access. He painted me as some tyrant holding an entire neighborhood hostage for fun. I let him talk. Because the longer he went on, the more the judge's face hardened. Then it was Mark's turn. And oh, did he deliver. He started slow, laying out the deed records, tax receipts, and maintenance logs. Clear, irrefutable proof that the bridge had never been HOA property. Then came the cameras. Still images of board members loosening bolts. Audio recordings of whispered sabotage plans. Timestamped, undeniable. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Then Mark dropped the hammer. The draft petition for the $200,000 loan Karen had tried to push, signed in her handwriting, with a note about developer partnership. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Mark leaned in, his voice sharp as a blade. "Your Honor, this HOA has not only overstepped its legal authority, but engaged in reckless conduct that endangered lives and attempted to mortgage this community's future for personal gain. My client didn't endanger this neighborhood, he saved it." Karen's face was fire engine red. She opened her mouth to object, but the judge cut her off. "Enough. I've heard enough." The ruling wasn't final that day, but the preliminary order was crystal clear. The injunction. Denied the cameras. Lawful the bridge. Confirmed private property. Karen had fired her biggest gun, and it backfired. So hard it nearly blew her off her chair. But the reckoning wasn't just legal, because courtrooms don't solve neighbor feuds. They just shine a light on them, and with that light came fallout. The next HOA meeting looked like a funeral. Half the room sat stone-faced, the other half openly gloating. Alan resigned in public, handing in his badge like it was a dirty rag. 2 more board members followed. That left Karen Dash alone. She stood at the podium, shaking with rage, trying to rally her troops. "Don't you see?" she shouted. "He's manipulating all of you. He wants control. He wants, but the room didn't buy it anymore." One woman in the back yelled, "At least he's not bankrupting us." Another shouted, "You put us in danger." The chant grew. "Step down. Step down. Step down." Karen's face crumpled. She dropped the gavel, stormed out, and slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. That was the last time she ever presided. Over a meeting, you'd think that'd be the end. But here's where the twist sharpens. A week later, I got a letter. Not from the HOA, not from Karen, from the developer. Polite, professional, but with the kind of weight only money carries. It read, "We understand you own critical access infrastructure in the community. We would like to discuss acquisition and partnership opportunities regarding your bridge and surrounding land rights." In plain English, they wanted to buy me out, and suddenly, I realized Karen hadn't been the true enemy all along. She'd just been the pawn, the real fight, the reckoning behind. The reckoning was about to begin. Karen was finished. The HOA was in shambles. The board fractured like a rotten fence post. But you know what? They cut the head off a snake. And sometimes you find out it wasn't the real snake at all, because that letter from the developer. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a neighbor feud. This was a land grab. We met at a cafe downtown. Neutral ground. Public enough to keep things civil. Private enough to speak freely. He walked in wearing a suit so sharp it could cut glass. Gold watch, manicured hands. The smile of a man who's won too many battles to care about one more. "Mr. Walker," he said, extending a hand. "Pleasure." I shook it, firm. He sat, ordered a black coffee, and didn't waste time. "You own a very valuable piece of property," he said. "That your bridge happens to control access to nearly 200 parcels. That's leverage. Leverage we'd like to acquire." T leaned back. "Acquire, huh?" He smiled like a shark. "We're prepared to make you an offer. Fair market value for the bridge, the surrounding right-of-way, and an easement agreement. Enough to make you very comfortable." I raised an eyebrow. "How comfortable?" He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a number with 6 zeros. My breath caught for a second, not because I was tempted, but because it confirmed just how big their plans were. They weren't offering me money for a little wooden bridge. They were offering me a golden handshake to clear the path for something bigger. I closed the folder and pushed it back. Not interested. His smile never wavered. Think about it. That bridge is old. Liability, maintenance. You want to spend your life patching planks, suing neighbors, or do you want to retire with more money than you'll ever need? I want my land to stay mine, I said flatly. His smile thinned. Be reasonable. Everyone has a price. Not me, I shot back. That's when the mask slipped. He leaned forward, voice low, sharp. You think you've won because you embarrassed that HOA president? Cute, but I don't need her. I have city councilmen, county planners. I can get roads rerouted, utilities approved, permits fast-tracked. One way or another, this community will be developed. The only question is whether you walk away rich or walk away broken. For a second, the cafe noise faded. It was just me and him locked in a stare. He thought I'd fold. He thought I was another Karen hungry for status, weak under pressure. But he didn't know about my grandfather's words, etched into my memory like steel. Keep it safe. I stood, dropped a 20 on the table for my coffee, and looked him in the eye. Good luck, I said. But you'll never set a foot on that bridge without me. And then I walked out. The harassment started within a week. Mysterious inspections from the county. Anonymous complaints filed with zoning. Letters warning me about code violations. Each one had the developer's fingerprints all over it. Then came the buyout offers again. Higher numbers. 7 zeros this time. Neighbors started getting. Letters, 2 shiny brochures promising revitalization and modern amenities. The kind of words that mean bulldozers and subdivisions. The pressure was mounting. The developer was trying to paint me as the villain, now the one man standing in the way of progress. But here's the thing about progress. It's not always what people want. One night, I hosted another bridge hour, instead of coffee and donuts. I brought out the big screen and showed my neighbors something new. Maps. Development maps. Plans I dug up from the county office. They showed roads cutting through old forests, cabins flattened for cul-de-sacs, even a proposal for a shopping strip where the meadow used to be. The room went silent, then angry. Someone shouted, "They're going to ruin everything." Another yelled, "We'll be taxed out of our homes." That's when it clicked for everyone. This wasn't about me. It wasn't even about Karen. This was about protecting the community from being swallowed whole. The developer had money. He had politicians. He had influence, but I had something he didn't. The bridge, the choke point, the one piece of land. His bulldozers couldn't touch without crossing me first. That night, as the neighbors rallied around me, I realized something. For months, I'd been fighting alone out of pride, out of stubbornness, out of loyalty to my grandfather. But now the whole community was behind me. The HOA was dead. Karen was gone. And the developer? He was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room isn't the richest one. It's the one with nothing left to lose. Asterisk, asterisk, the developer wasn't bluffing. 2 weeks after that cafe meeting, I woke up to the rumble of heavy machinery, bulldozers, excavators, trucks, lined up at the far side of the creek and standing there in a hardit. Grinning like a wolf was the developer himself. He wasn't trying to buy me out anymore. He was trying to build around me. I walked out to the bridge, shotgun slung on my shoulder, not aiming, just carrying. A statement. Morning. I called across the creek. He cupped his hands. Morning. We're starting preliminary work today. You might want to move your truck. Things could get noisy. I smirked. You planning to build a road through a creek? Without an easement? He grinned wider. Already filed for a variance. County loves new tax revenue. You'll lose that bridge whether you like it or not. Might as well take the money while I'm still offering." I shook my head slowly. "You really don't get it, do you?" See, what he didn't know, what nobody outside my lawyer and a county clerk knew, was this: months earlier, when Karen first tried her stunt, I'd filed paperwork of my own, not just to confirm my ownership of the bridge, but to designate it as a historic structure. Turns out, my grandfather hadn't just built it. He'd registered it decades ago in a county archive that nobody bothered to check. That meant the bridge wasn't just property, was a protected landmark, which meant no bulldozer. No backhoe, no county variance could touch it without federal review. So I pulled the document from my jacket, held it high, and shouted, "Go ahead, try it. The second you touch this bridge, you'll be facing not me but the U.S. Department of the Interior." The look on his face was priceless. The sheriff showed up not long after neighbors had called, worried about the machines. The deputy walked over, reviewed my paperwork, then turned to the developer. "Sir, you're ordered to cease operations until federal review is complete." The developer's smile finally cracked. He argued, he cursed, he threatened lawsuits. But the machines shut down, one by one. Operators packed up. Neighbors gathered on my side of the creek, cheering, clapping, some even crying with relief, because for the first time, it wasn't just me holding the line. It was all of us. Karen reappeared once after that, skulking at the edge of a meeting, muttering about conspiracies. Nobody listened. She moved away within a month. The HOA dissolved. The developer withdrew. And the bridge, it stayed. A year later, I hosted a barbecue on the creek bank. Every neighbor came. Kids ran across the bridge. Dogs splashed in the water. Old folks told stories about when the land was wild and free. Someone asked me, "Why didn't you take the money? You could have retired rich." I just smiled and pointed to the bridge. My grandfather didn't build this for money. He built it to keep people connected. And some things you just don't sell. That night, after everyone left, I walked out onto the bridge alone. The wood creaked under my boots, same as it had for generations. I leaned on the railing, listened to the water, and whispered the words I'd carried all along. "Kept it safe, Grandpa. Kept it safe." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the war was over. Asterisk, asterisk, all right, everyone. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.